and welcome to this week's edition of SportsZone. We're going to start off with the good stuff, Studio 90, talk about this week in the world of soccer. I'm joined by Daniel, as usual. We're going to start off by discussing the Champions League, and the biggest matchup in the Champions League, I guess it was a couple weeks ago, was when Barcelona took on Tottenham. Great game. Messi looked unbelievable. So, Daniel, I'll start off with asking you. Messi was just unbelievable this game, and the talk after the game was really all about Messi and how this performance maybe cemented the fact that he's the best player of all time. Do you agree with this sentiment?
I don't think that this performance, cemented him as the best ever, because I think even if he didn't play this game, he's the best ever. But what I watched from Messi this game was incredible touch, which we've grown very used to from him. He was involved in all of the goals. He had a brilliant through ball over the top that resulted to one of the goals. He had a first touch goal to the bottom corner, and then he also scored at the end of the game. He also hit the post twice, so who knows? He could have technically scored 4 goals. Maybe the game would have played out differently, so maybe not necessarily 4. And then he was also involved in another brilliant goal with an excellent through ball right at the beginning of the game. So all in all, Tottenham tried their best. They didn't have their whole lineup. They had guys injured such as Eriksen and Dele Alli, so that definitely hurt. But I think regardless, I don't think they quite had what it took to beat Barca. But I think maybe at best they could have tied them if they had all their pieces.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned Messi had an all-time performance. Could have scored 4 goals that you mentioned. He just continues to amaze, and it's amazing how he wasn't listed as one of those players in the FIFA Best Player
It's
award.
voter fatigue. What else can I say?
Yeah, it's really crazy. And we'll talk about the other team, Tottenham, losing again in the Champions League. They lost their last matchup to Inter. And in this tough group, Daniel, do you think they'll be able to make it out of the group?
I don't. I think they've dug themselves in a tough hole. They're 6 points down to Inter and Barca. They're basically going to have to win out in order to make it to the next round. And, they've had some pretty deflating losses. Their loss against Inter was incredibly unfortunate for them. They were up 1-0 all the way up until the 85th minute or so. Icardi scores a volley from outside the box. That was incredible. Then they score a header in stoppage time to win the game. And Tottenham loses 2-1. But I think even if they don't make it past the group stage, they should be happy with the third-place finish in this really tough group. I mean, maybe they're more talented than Inter, but I think they have a real shot at winning the Europa League. And maybe they'll face up in later rounds against inner-city rivals like Chelsea and Arsenal, who are in the Europa League right now. We'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be tough for Tottenham to come out of this group with both Barcelona and Inter Milan. And Tottenham, who have done well domestically in the past, haven't really been able to replicate in the Champions League. So we'll see how it moves forward from there. Another English team in the Champions League this year, Liverpool, obviously, who made it to the final last year. They ended up losing 1-0 to Napoli. They are also in a very tough group with both PSG and Napoli, even though they beat PSG in their first matchup. So this win by Napoli really brought the group. This group is really wide open right now. So who do you see being the 2 teams that are going to be able to make it out of what could be considered to be the group of death?
So I have PSG actually coming in first, despite their loss to Liverpool on the road in the first opener of the Champions League. And then I've got Liverpool coming in second. Napoli, they tied their first game in the Champions League. That kind of hurt. Yeah, beating Liverpool did help, but I don't think they have the talent to beat both PSG and Liverpool on the road. Liverpool, they had a bad game, I'll admit. They weren't creating many chances. Napoli scored a last-minute goal, and Insigne scored off a beautiful pass from Callejon. And I think it'll be interesting to see how this group plays out. It's probably the most compelling out of all the Champions League groups. And I'm personally really looking forward to the next time PSG play Liverpool. Those are 2 top-tier clubs, and you normally don't see such high-level teams play in the group very often. Normally maybe in one group that's the case, but that's about it.
Yeah, this is definitely a top-tier group, especially the fact that both PSG and Liverpool are really attacking teams, and that makes for a great matchup. So we'll see how that group pans out, but I would tend to agree that PSG and Liverpool are going to be the teams moving to the next round. But we'll talk about Liverpool again, but this time domestically. They tied Manchester City 0-0 this weekend. Kind of a boring game. We expected more goals considering both teams are very attacking teams, but it ended up being 0-0. Manchester City missed a penalty in the 85th minute. Riyad Mahrez taking the ball away from forward Gabriel Jesus to take the penalty, skies it over the bar. So, Daniel, what did you make of this move by Mahrez to take away the penalty from Jesus, and do you think that this was warranted?
I gotta say, this guy's not going to be taking penalties for City ever again, unless it's, like a final or a Champions League game of some sorts where, you have to kick 5. I think Pep Guardiola probably regretted taking out Sergio Aguero out because he's really reliable from the penalty spot, and I think he would have made it. So, yeah, they did drop 2 points that game, but let's be honest, they're the deepest, the best team in the Premier League. It's their league to lose. And they kind of outplayed Liverpool on the road. We'll see how the season plays out.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Definitely Manchester City, the deepest team. You even look at that bench, Gabriel Jesus coming off the bench, which is crazy considering he's really a really great young world-class striker. So we'll see how the Premier League moves on going forward. But another team in the Premier League, the other side of Manchester United, in turmoil. The reports came out that Jose Mourinho was going to be fired regardless of the result, but they ended up squeaking away from the game with 3 points, beating Newcastle 3-2. So, Daniel, do you think this result is going to save Jose Mourinho's job, or do you think he's pretty much doomed at this point?
He'll save his job for another couple weeks, but I don't think he's going to be, with United for the next several years, unless they just go on a hot streak and somehow make a top 4, which I don't see happening. Alexis Sanchez finally got a goal to win the game. Maybe if he sort of replicates his level for Arsenal, then we're going to be seeing a different United team. But there's just so much locker room turmoil that I don't think it's good for Paul Pogba and Jose Mourinho to be in the same place. And let's be honest, they should have lost this game. They were down 2-0. And the ref made a major mistake. He should have called a penalty against United, making, Newcastle potentially going up 3-0 right there. And you don't want that, against Newcastle, conceding all these goals. So Mourinho did want defenders, from management to sign defenders. And they didn't really get any new defenders. So I kind of feel bad about that. But at the end of the day, you're the manager. You got to have more cohesiveness with your team,
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely really no excuses for Jose Mourinho. With the amount of money Manchester United have spent over the past few years, he definitely should be making more with this team. But for now, I think this result is going to save his job. But I don't know. I can't see him making it past January with this Manchester United team, but we'll wait and see what happens there. So we'll shift over. Lastly, we'll talk about La Liga, and a little bit of a shift in La Liga this season. Usually we're used to seeing either Real Madrid or Barcelona at the top of the table, but right now Sevilla are actually at the top of the table. Real Madrid have lost, I believe it's 3 consecutive games in all competitions. So Daniel, I'll ask a couple of questions. Number one, what do you think is Real Madrid's number one problem, and do you think Sevilla has a chance to actually win this league?
So first of all, I think we all know what Real Madrid's problem is. They don't have Cristiano Ronaldo anymore. I mean, this is a guy who he scored 40 to 50 to 60 goals in his sleep every season, and now they lost that player, and they didn't really replace him with anybody who's a goal-scoring threat anywhere near his level. I mean, there were rumors they were going to sign Neymar. That didn't happen. Rumors of Mbappe. So they're having trouble scoring goals, clearly, They're not playing too well. They also lost in the Champions League. Barca is the more surprising team to me. I expect them to be doing better. High expectations. I think they'll figure it out, win the league. Barca and Sevilla, they're playing, right? But let's be real. I think Barca is going to win this game, and I'll be surprised if they even tie this weekend. Sevilla, I don't really think has a real shot at winning this league. Maybe they can place second or third, though.
Yeah. Even though they don't have a shot at the winning the league, it's still good to see another team being at the top of the table other than Real Madrid and Barcelona, which is what we're used to seeing. But I think that's all we have for this week's edition of Studio 90, and more Sports Zone after this.
Welcome back to Sports Zone. This is our NFL segment, Going for Two. I'm joined alongside by Cam and Dan. Lots to talk about in Week 5 in the NFL. We're going to start with the good, I guess, and maybe some history setting, if you will. Tom Brady on Thursday Night Football against the Indianapolis Colts in Foxborough. becoming the third quarterback in NFL history to eclipse 500 touchdowns. Drew Brees also active, still nipping on his heels, but Tom Brady joining the 500 club with Peyton Manning and Brett Favre. Cam, let's start with you. Talk about what a career Tom Brady has had. Now another milestone for him.
Yeah, I've got to say it's truly incredible what this man's able to accomplish, especially 42.
Yeah.
42, and he still looks like he's still going. It must be in the diet. I don't know what it is, but as long as he can keep playing and putting up numbers for the Patriots, there really is no bar for how far he can go. But one downside is first half unstoppable, second half a little bit of a falter by the Patriots. Colts seemed like they started to turn things around. It was a much closer second half than it was in the first half. But they were still able to overcome maybe that veteran presence, able to push past. And Drew Brees, what else can you say about the man? He's been down his whole life. He's not really had many rosters behind him, but he's still been able to go out there and produce. Even when he was originally with the Chargers, got pushed out with that shoulder injury. He's always been said that he's too short for the NFL. But then he just goes out and shows everyone wrong, and then he goes out and he really earned this record.
Yeah, Drew Brees, now the all-time passing leader, eclipsing Brett Favre with over 7,000 passing yards in his career, and Tom Brady as well. It must be something in the TB12 lifestyle diet that he keeps preaching. We've heard 10 years from Brady, 5 years from Brady. At this point, who knows? You know, personally as a Jets fan, I need to see him gone like this year.
I'm a
But
Dolphins fan
that's,
too, so
that's,
I agree.
that's,
sorry.
that's neither here nor there. But swinging to some active teams and teams now that are still undefeated. You have the Kansas City Chiefs picking up their 5th win of the season behind Patrick Mahomes. So, Dan, what's going on with Kansas City? I know we've seen some hot starts from them in the past, but do they sustain this now?
You know, I think they do. I think they're going to be a top 2 seed in the AFC. It's going to be a huge game between the Patriots and the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, who's been the MVP candidate this year, has gone to Foxborough in a tough environment. I think it could decide who's going to get the 1 seed, which could be important down the line, as we know how hostile the Chiefs crowd is. I think, honestly, the Chiefs aren't quite ready to take that next step right now. Yeah, they're 5-0, but we're talking about a team that's defense is very iffy. They traded away their best corner to the Los Angeles Rams. That sure didn't help. They give up a lot of points. Yeah, they did well against Jacksonville, but you know you're playing at home against Blake Bortles. You know you expect them to only score 14 points against you. So I think it's gonna be a big test when they play some elite quarterbacks to see how this defense can fare. In order to really determine whether or not this Kansas City team is going to do anything in the playoffs this year.
And now we're going to see it for sure this week on Sunday Night Football. The Kansas City Chiefs going to New England to take on Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. But now going out west, you had the LA Rams with a little bit of a nail-biter against the Seattle Seahawks in the 12th man, but picking up their 5th win of the season. Cam, going to you, we've seen how dominant that the LA Rams are and seem to be the most complete team. Gurley in the backfield, Goff with so many weapons to throw the ball to. And that defense, you have Donald, Sue, Marcus Peters in the secondary. Like, are the Rams for real this year?
I have to say, as a Seahawks fan, I was very excited to see them be competitive in any capacity. But I have to say, the injuries are starting to show on the Rams, and I think that's really showed through against the Seahawks. Because from a fan, the Seahawks are not ready to face a team like what the Rams are supposed to be. And so the fact that that game was close really showed that they are missing Aqib Talib at corner because Russell Wilson has no one to throw to, so I don't know who was catching those passes. And I really think the Rams, if they're going to compete with teams like the Chiefs, they need to get their roster healthy and make sure everyone's available on the field. Otherwise, I don't know if just the combo of Goff and Gurley and Peters on defense would be enough to keep them competitive against an offense like the Chiefs.
It should be very interesting to see now, kind of as we starting to move into the second quarter of the season, if you will. But speaking of now moving and kind of well into the second quarter of the season, we've seen a lot of shortcomings, especially in the kicking game this year in the NFL. We've seen, and I mean we've seen a lot. Mason Crosby missing 4 field goals. Aaron Rodgers just visibly disgusted on the sidelines with that. You have kickers that can't reliably hit from 50 yards. But, so Dan, I'm going to go to you on this. We've seen a lot of inconsistency with kicking this year. Do you think teams are going to start thinking twice on fourth down, especially with a longer 40, maybe even a 50-yard field goal?
Oh yeah, I mean we've been seeing a lot of coaches around the league who have been really gutsy. I mean, for example, like the game we just talked about. Yeah, they weren't in the field goal range, the Rams, but on their own side of the field, they went for it on 4th and 1 to clinch the game. But yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on what kicker you have on those situations. When you got a guy like Justin Tucker for the Ravens and Joe Flacco at quarterback, you're going to want to get the 3 points, right? But with Mason Crosby, missing 4 kicks, and it's 4th and 1 at the 35 or 30, and you got Aaron Rodgers in the backfield throwing footballs, I think if you're McCarthy, you go for it in those situations looking forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be very interesting to see as we kind of move along this season, especially with such inconsistency in the kicking game. Greg Zuerlein from the Rams hurt, now giving way to Sam Ficken from Penn State. Obviously, the kicking game not as consistent there. Zuerlein pretty much always automatic, kind of like Justin Tucker. But now swinging to some other teams and other games this year. The Cleveland Browns have won 2 games in an NFL season. Who would have thought the Cleveland Browns have won 2 games now with Baker Mayfield at the helm? Cam, I know it's early to say that are they going to contend for the division, because I think that's a lofty expectation. But are the Browns finally turning it around as a team?
Well, regardless of whatever fan you are, it feels good deep down inside to see the Browns do well in anything. But I have to say, the games that they're losing, even the games they're losing, they're still close. So you have to look and see that there's something going on there. Whether the offense is starting to click more now that Baker's at the helm, or the defense is starting to get a little more chiseled, starting to put everything together. But I really think that it's really early to say, and especially with the Browns' track record, it's difficult to make a prediction such as this. But if they can remain close in the rest of the games this season like they've done so far, they could definitely make a run.
It could be very interesting. Baker Mayfield and Denzel Ward, their two of their top 5 picks this year, really panning out, and the Browns leading the way in turnovers in the NFL this season, which is a stat I don't think any of the 3 of us could have ever imagined saying out loud. But the Cleveland Browns are currently leading the NFL in turnovers. But now swinging to Week 6, moving along in the season, we obviously have some big matchups, but we're going to go to each one of you guys. Dan, let's start with you. What is your matchup to watch Week 6?
As I mentioned earlier, Patriots, Chiefs. You've got Tom Brady, arguably the GOAT, against the front runner for MVP. I mean, what else can you ask for? These are the 2 best teams in the AFC, in my opinion. And we get to really see what the Chiefs are all about. This is going to be a tough road game. Mahomes, he had a tough road game against the Denver Broncos, and that's a good defense. But now we're going to see possibly added pressure on him because the Patriots are, the Goliath of the NFL. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how those 2 quarterbacks play.
Cam?
I have to agree. I really do think the Patriots-Chiefs is the matchup of the week because we're looking at 2 teams who you talked about it a bit earlier, Dan, but Chiefs, I believe, are currently ranked last in total defense. So I feel like the Patriots will be the first true test of elite quarterback versus upcoming elite quarterback to really see who can win the shootout, basically, because Patriots defense also has had its question marks throughout the year.
I'd have to agree with you. Sunday Night Football, all the lights, all the attention on Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. We saw them do well at home against Jacksonville, a very reputable defense, but now you're playing against an offense that can keep up with yours. So I think, however, Kansas City pulls this one out 38-35. I think it's going to be a shootout in Foxborough. I think it'll be very interesting, but granted, now that I just said it, Andy Reid is going to find a way to fail me. Just seems to be my luck. But anyway, that's all the time we have for this edition of Going for Two. More SportsZone coming to you after this. Welcome back to SportsZone. This is the college football segment. I'm joined alongside by Dan and Luke. Guys, big matchups happening this past week in Week 6. 2 big upsets. Let's start with one of the biggest, one of the most high-profile rivalry games in the nation, the Red River rivalry game. Texas taking down Oklahoma. Luke, going to start with you. Texas with a big win on the road after starting the season pretty shaky, but is Texas back?
You know what? I'm gonna say right now, right here, Texas is back. They've been struggling these past 2 years, but this Oklahoma team that beat 48-45 this past weekend, they were legit. Kyler Murray's just behind Tua. He's definitely up there for the Heisman. He's only lost 2 games since the 9th grade of high school, so he's definitely been up there and he's a winner. And Texas made him cry at the end of the day. Ellinger definitely pulled through, carried his own weight, and he's looking like a real solid quarterback as well down there. And I do believe Texas is back.
Yeah, very hot take there. He only lost 2 games since 9th grade. Very Jimmy Garoppolo-esque, Mr. I haven't lost a game since high school until he gets to San Francisco. But swinging to probably the biggest upset of the weekend, down in Florida, in the swamp, you had the Gators chomp back in business, beating Ed Orgeron's LSU team. Now, LSU dropping substantially in the AP rankings. Dan, going to you about that. What happened for Coach O down in Florida?
Well, to be honest, this is an LSU team that just squeaked by on the road against Auburn a few weeks back, so it was a matter of time before this team lost. I don't think they're a true national championship contender, In fact, I think Florida, they had a really strong defensive performance. I'm really impressed by Dan Mullen, their head coach. He's really captaining a team that's, pretty talented. And after the Kentucky loss, that's deflating. To lose to a team that you haven't lost to in about 30 years. A lot of players normally would have sort of, a lack of confidence and morale. But he rallied his troops. Felipe Franks, he played all right. He's not amazing. He's not like Will Greer, who they had before he transferred to West Virginia. But we'll see how Florida plays down the line. I think that Georgia game at that neutral site stadium in Jacksonville in a few weeks is going to be a game to watch, though, for sure.
Yeah, definitely something to watch as the SEC race, at least in the East, and actually in the West, too, pretty much dominated Alabama, Georgia, and it looks like both of those teams will collide in Atlanta for the SEC title game. Swinging to a couple other big marquee matchups from this past week. Notre Dame beating Virginia Tech on the road. Notre Dame now the number 5 team in the country. Should be very interesting to see where the Irish stack up. College football playoff ranking coming out very soon. Notre Dame, they need help from one of the top 4 teams. I don't even know if a Georgia loss against Alabama in the SEC title is going to cut it for Notre Dame, but it'll be very interesting to keep an eye on that. And swinging to another upset in the top 25, Michigan State falling at home to Northwestern. Clayton Thorson leading the Wildcats to a pretty impressive win on the road in Lansing. But now swinging ahead to week 7 here, couple more big matchups here. Starting out west with the Pac-12, Oregon at home against Washington. The winner probably going to be the Pac-12 North representative in their title game. Dan, who comes out with this one?
I've got Oregon. You've got Justin Herbert at quarterback. This guy right here, he's a top prospect in all of college football next year in the draft for in terms of quarterbacks. And you've got an Oregon team that I think is angry. You're looking a few weeks back, they just lost to Stanford. A late fumble, cost them a very, strange touchdown got called back. They were really unlucky there, and I think they're going to play angry. They've got a really loud crowd, and I think they're going to take down Jake Browning and Oregon. And Washington.
Should be a very interesting one to watch out west. The number 7 Washington Huskies going into the Outson Zoo to play the number 17 Oregon Ducks. But now going back down south, Coach O and Ed Orgeron's LSU Tigers get to stay in Death Valley, but they are hosting the number 2 team in the country in the red-hot Georgia Bulldogs. Luke, going to go to you here on this one. This one is huge for Georgia. And again, we've seen SEC teams topple other teams in their conference, especially teams like LSU and Georgia. But is Georgia too good this year for LSU?
You know what? I'm actually going to agree with you on that. I think Georgia this year, they look legit. And last year they came up a little bit short. A lot of these players actually came back this year, and they had that same winning mentality from last year. And they're going to bring that into the Valley next week, and that's going to be a good game to watch for sure.
Absolutely. And then up north in the Big Ten, you have number 12 Wisconsin, almost said Washington out here, taking on number 14 Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, and the Khakis in the Big House taking on Wisconsin. Could be very decisive for that division, especially with Ohio State Not necessarily the strongest we've seen Ohio State in years past. I know they squeaked out a win at Penn State, but they still have Wisconsin and Michigan on their schedule left to play. So that'll be very interesting to watch. And it'll be very interesting to see with college football playoff rankings only coming out in 2 weeks from today, or 2 weeks from yesterday. But anyway, that's all the time we have for this edition of the College Football segment. More Sports Zone coming to you after this.
And welcome back to Sports Zone. This is our NBA segment, Throwing It Up. I'm joined by Dan and Isaac. So we'll start off by talking about the big news of the day, which is Jimmy Butler. He demanded a trade, I believe it was a couple weeks ago, and today it came out that he actually yelled at his GM, coaches, and teammates in a practice today. So Dan, what do you make of these recent developments in the Jimmy Butler situation?
He's got to go. The Timberwolves have been asking for a lot for him, which makes sense because he's a great player. But if they don't trade him, he's going to do what Kawhi did last year. He's not going to play for the Timberwolves. He does not want to be there, and he's not going to play if he doesn't want to be there. So he needs to be traded. The Timberwolves, I think, currently they need to lower their asking price a little bit. Still try to get a good deal for him because he's a really good player. They need to lower their asking price and get him out of there.
Yeah, definitely, especially with that expiring contract. I mean, you gotta get him out of there, get something for him, because the more you hold on to him, the less teams are gonna offer, I believe. So I think you definitely gotta get rid of Jimmy Butler, build this team around Karl Anthony Towns. And Isaac, I'll ask you about that. Going forward with the Timberwolves without Jimmy Butler, how do you think they'll be able to build around Karl Anthony Towns going to the future in that stacked Western Conference?
Well, I think you're right. I think the West is stacked, and to be quite honest, I think they won't be able to rebuild. I think this is a worst-case scenario for the Timberwolves. I think Tom Thibodeau has proven that he's completely lost both the locker room and capabilities in the front office. They have absolutely no leverage now, and they've put themselves into that situation by letting the Miami trade fall through. Now, you have a situation where it's become almost like a reality show. Every single practice is a distraction. It's no longer actual team building. And I think that the Wolves really need to clean house. Obviously, keep your core of Karl Anthony Towns, but Andrew Wiggins has proven to be a non-starter in the league, unfortunately. He had a lot of promise coming in, but he has just not lived up to his draft status or that massive contract they've given him. They need to clear that if they can at this point. It's such a nightmare. But I think the silver lining would definitely be Karl Anthony Towns. He's proven that he can be someone that you can build around, even if he's not a perfect, top grade center. He can be a vital piece. And if you're going to build around, you need to start. Tom Thibodeau has to completely forget about this delusion he has of holding on to Jimmy Butler and competing in the West, because it's just not going to happen, and that was proven today.
Yeah, definitely a tough situation for the Timberwolves right now. You mentioned that Andrew Wiggins contract, which is something I've never really understood. Definitely not a max player, and doesn't give them that much cap room flexibility, especially the fact that they just signed Karl Anthony Towns to a max extension. So we'll see how they go from here. But we'll switch topics. We'll talk about a big injury that happened. Dante Murray getting injured, and we'll ask Dan about that. Dan, how do you think this injury is going to hurt the Spurs?
Well, I mean, coming into the season, they have LaMarcus Aldridge and they have DeMar DeRozan, but behind those two, DeJounte Murray was supposed to be, their next biggest star. He was supposed to really break out this season, and now the only thing he's breaking is his leg. So it's a huge blow to the Spurs. They don't have really someone who can even really come close to playing to DeJounte Murray's level, and it's going to really hurt them. And I think it knocks them from a top 5 team in the West to someone who's just trying to get one of the last spots in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely a tough loss for the Spurs, especially losing Kawhi this summer, all the turmoil that's going on with them. So we'll see how they'll be able to compete again in that stacked Western Conference. And we'll stick in the Western Conference. Preseason play starting, and one of the biggest storylines this preseason so far has been Luka Doncic, who's been playing unbelievably well for the Dallas Mavericks. So Isaac, I'll ask you about that. Do you believe that Luka Doncic will be able to replicate the success in the regular season?
I think he will. I think with a lot of EuroLeague stars, you see it takes a little bit of an adjustment period, but then they find their groove. They adapt their European game to the NBA. And I think Luka Doncic has proven to be an incredible talent, especially passing the ball. And I think that's what Dallas has really been missing, because they have Dirk. He's old, but he can still not carry the team, but contribute. And that's all you can really ask for a 40-something-year-old power forward from Germany. But with Harrison Barnes, they have pieces they need not to really compete, but to build for the future. And I think Luka Doncic will be a vital piece for that going forward.
Yeah, for me, Luka Doncic, the steal of this draft at number 3. Don't know why the Hawks gave him up to get Trae Young, but that's a whole different story. But I think we'll end on that, and that's it for Throwing It Up. More Sports Zone after this.
Hello, welcome back to SportsZone. This is Getting to Third. My name is Camden. I'm joined here with Dan and Lucas. Today, with the divisional series wrapping up, we're going to be analyzing the AL and NL matchups going forward, as well as what happened in the series. Let's start with Dan.
So, the Indians got swept in 3 by the Astros, and it just showed that the Indians, compared to the other teams that made the playoffs, they're not on the same level. They got dominated by all 3 of the Astros pitchers, especially Verlander. Verlander is a god among men, honestly. At his age, to still perform in the way that he does is fantastic. A slightly more competitive series was the Yankees and the Red Sox series, but well, the Yankees didn't do so well. So the first game, they went down by a bunch and almost came back, but ended up falling a run short. In the second game, Masahiro Tanaka pitched a great game, especially compared to the other pitching throughout the series by the Yankees, and the Yankees were able to beat the Red Sox at Fenway, which for a lot of Yankees fans, including myself, gave them a lot of hope. They had taken home field advantage effectively at that point because there were 3 games left and 2 at Yankee Stadium, but then they lost awfully in Game 3, 16-1, and they lost Game 4 by 1 run. So Game 3, Severino wasn't pitching like himself, and Aaron Boone waited too long to take him out of the game, and then replaced him with the wrong pitcher and Lance Lynn, who should not have been pitching at such a high leverage situation. And it just all went downhill from there. The Yankees couldn't score. The Red Sox couldn't stop scoring. They won 16-1. Game 4 was closer. CC Sabathia pitched fine, but not that well. And again, I think Aaron Boone made a few wrong calls. The Red Sox stayed hot. The Yankees, again, almost came back at the end, but couldn't do it. The Red Sox, they showed why they won 108 games. They just couldn't. They couldn't be stopped.
Thank you, Dan. Now we're going to go to Lucas for the NL matchups, as well as what happened.
Yeah, so the NL matchups after the Cubs and Rockies in the wild card, and you saw the Rockies come up successful after extra innings. You had the Rockies against the Brewers, and in that series you can obviously tell that although the Brewers have been yelled at all year by critics and other people alike that their pitching was weak, their pitching was better than that of Colorado, and also showed that Colorado can't really hit outside of Coors Stadium. So the Brewers, superior bats and Yelich and Braun and Kane walked out of that one pretty successfully after 3. And the other series we had was the Dodgers and the Braves. And originally I thought that the Braves were actually going to come out successful against the Dodgers. However, at the end of the day, the Dodgers, their pitching was just lights out. And although the Braves did take a really, really good game from the Dodgers, it just wasn't enough to overtake the bats and the powerful team.
Well said, Lucas. All right, so now with only 4 teams remaining, we've got the Dodgers, Brewers, Red Sox, and Astros. How does this affect your World Series predictions going forward?
Well, my original World Series prediction, I did have the Red Sox in the World Series, and I just still think that's going to be true coming out of the AL. Although you're going to have the repeat you're going to have the defending World Series champions, per se, against them in the ALCS. I do think that the Red Sox are just pitching and batting is all going their way, except for David Price. But it's all been all good for the Red Sox. So that they're still my AL favorite. In the NLCS, it's going to be a very interesting game between the powerful bats of the Brewers and the powerful pitching of the Dodgers. So I don't really know who's going to come out of this one. However, I do think at the end of the day, the Dodgers have enough bats to counteract the pitching from the Brewers. So I'm going to go Dodgers, Red Sox in my World Series.
As for me, I think actually both of those may be wrong. I think the ALCS is gonna go to 7. I can't see it going less than 7, and it's hard for me to say that the Red Sox are going to lose because they've just looked so good. But I think eventually the pitching of Houston is going to come out on top against the Red Sox. The Red Sox don't have the bullpen to do it, and Houston's starting pitching is phenomenal. As for the National League, I think it really just comes down to the Brewers being too hot for even the Dodgers, who are a total powerhouse, to stop them. I can't see the Brewers being cooled down. So that's the World Series matchup for me, is the Astros and the Brewers.
All right. Thank you for your take. Honestly, it's hard to say, especially with the Astros and Red Sox both being stacked on both the offensive and defensive side. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Thanks for watching Getting to Third.
And welcome back to SportsZone. This is our favorite segment, Thumbles, where we give a thumbs up and a thumbs down to events in the world of sports and the world at large. I'm going to start off by throwing a thumbs up to the weather, because we have to mention the weather every week. This is pretty much what this show is about. The weather's been fantastic for the past few days in October, which is pretty surprising, but it's supposed to thunderstorm this weekend. I just had a mini seizure there, but we're okay. And then I'm going to give a thumbs down to midterms, because midterms are coming up, and that's never good. But I'll switch over to the world of sports. Thumbs up to the Cleveland Browns, because they have 2 wins, and that's pretty good for them. Always kind of felt bad for their fan base, but seeing them win 2 games is nice to see. Thumbs down to my fantasy team, because I have yet to win a game this season. It's not looking good for me, so that's never good. I'll throw a thumbs, I guess, up to Jimmy Butler, because I respect the fact that he can yell at his GM, coaches, and teammates in a practice. I mean, that's kind of cool. I respect that. And I'll give a thumbs up to Manchester United, because we won a game this weekend. We beat Newcastle 3-2, and even though we were down 2-0 in the first 10 minutes and I thought we were going to lose, we actually won the game. But we'll see how it goes from here. And I think that's all I have for today, and I'll throw it over to Dan.
So I'm going to start with a thumbs up to UFC as a whole, because UFC 229 happened. It was fantastic, and everything's going to go up for UFC. And that brings me to Derrick Lewis, who I also have to give a huge thumbs up to. Guy was hilarious. He won his fight, and apparently he gained 500,000 followers on Instagram. So that's pretty impressive. Khabib also needs to get a thumbs up, because, well, personally I hate Conor McGregor, so I was very happy that he lost. And I mean, I don't know. I think what he did was, I think he was in the right. I know that's a minority opinion, but that's how I feel. And then I'm also going to give a thumbs up to Todd Gurley, because the guy is a monster, an absolute monster in the red zone. And he's the MVP of my fantasy team. I've won 5 games, and I would have won maybe 1 without him. So yeah, Todd Gurley's great. I am also going to give a thumbs up to the Rams as a whole, because they're undefeated. Thumbs down to the weather, because there's a hurricane coming, so that'll be fun. And then a thumbs up back to sports to the Astros, because I really think they looked like world beaters in the ALDS, and I see them going a long way, maybe even repeating. That's all I got.
All right, this is Cam. First, I'm going to start with a thumbs up to the weather. Why not? I like a challenge. Bring it on. I'm going to going into sports, thumbs up to the Seahawks offensive line, because even though they get trash talked all the time and Russell Wilson's constantly running for help, they're ranked 6th right now. Do with that what you want. I'm also going to give I guess I'll end with a thumbs up to the event on Friday to go yell at the generator, show it who's boss.
Okay, so thumbs up to a team nobody's talking about this year, the Cincinnati Bengals. They're at the top of their division. We know that they always struggle in the playoffs. They always lose that first game. Maybe this year it'll be a different story. We'll see down the line. They still haven't played the Steelers yet in those division games, so that's going to be big. I'm going to give a thumbs up to the Carolina Panthers, too. We sort of saw a little bit of a down year last year for Cam Newton and the year before, because when you go back to that 2015 season, he was the best quarterback in the league, and really that team goes where Cam Newton takes them to, and they scored over 30 points against the Giants, and they won that game. I'm going to give a thumbs down to the New York Yankees. They're an arrogant franchise. They're known for having a huge payroll. They were arrogant going into this series, despite the fact that they didn't win the division. And they lost to the Red Sox. I mean, you can't fault yourself for that. Most fan bases would go into that playoff series thinking that they're the underdogs, but not the Yankees. Anyway, that's all I've got this week. Thank you.
Big thumbs up to the NHL for finally getting back, but big thumbs down to Gary Bettman for decreasing the size of goalie pads, which has cost Roberto Luongo, Quick, and now Brian Elliott on the Flyers injuries. Big thumbs down to the Flyers for losing their home opener 8-2, but thumbs up to Gritty for at least making it entertaining. And thumbs up to Todd Bowles for remembering that there's a second half that you also have to coach. And thumbs down to Tom Thibodeau for completely losing and destroying the Timberwolves' hopes for the futures. Big thumbs up to SportsZone for letting me participate today.
All right, I'd like to start off by giving a much-deserved thumbs up to Mitch Trubisky for finally hitting a receiver more than 10 yards down the field. That's a big one. Another big thumbs up to the Bears for being number 7 in the power rankings. I don't know who was drunk enough to put them there, but hey, it's good enough at the end of the day. I also want to give a thumbs up to Khabib for a nice win, and he also fights bears on his free time. So I guess that's awesome. So big thumbs up. We're going to give a thumbs down to the Timberwolves because how do you trade away great players for Jimmy Butler and you don't keep Jimmy Butler happy? Something seems to be wrong there. Now I'm going to finish off by giving a big thumbs up to the Chicago Cubs because they deserve to lose that playoff series. That's all thumbs I have.
All right, bringing it home here. We're going to start thumbs up to the New York Jets for beating a pretty reputable opponent in the Denver Broncos, but thumbs down, we still don't know how to lose. Why do we beat teams that we have no business being in games with? Detroit on the road. We put up 48 points and picked the ball off 5 times. Denver, with Von Miller on defense and DeMarcus Ware, our running game runs for 219 yards on 15 carries, and we put up 34 points at home. How do we not beat Cleveland? How do we not beat some of the teams that we have played? I get Jacksonville, but how do we not beat Cleveland? How come the Jets are on the losing end of history so often? We were the team that the Browns broke a 635-day winning streak on. How? But thumbs up to my fantasy team. I had Isaiah Crowell because you know what? I take one Jets running back because there's always 1 week a year that they do really good things. This was that 1 week, and he carried me to victory again. 219 yards, franchise record, not a big deal. But got to give him that, and I'll take the 2 and 3 wins, so we're not completely out of it yet. That'll change by week 8. We all know how this goes, Jets fans. Thumbs down to the New York Yankees for blowing it. I'm sorry, you cannot lose a playoff game at home by the score of 16-1. Like, that is just completely unacceptable for the New York Yankees. You are the New York Yankees. You are not the Kansas City Royals. You need to be able to actually play here and be able to stay with a team like Boston. But, now I get to say go Astros because I really hope that they beat Boston. And, who knows? The defending world champs have a trick up their sleeve or two. I'm going to thumbs up Graham Gano and his iron leg. 63 yards is a long way in Carolina. And Giant fans just they scored, they took the lead, they were up 1, and Graham Gano just ripped their hearts right out of their chest, burying a 63-yard field goal. And you know what? Thumbs up to Graham Gano on the fact that he was really the only kicker with a notable highlight this week. Because thumbs down to Mason Crosby for 4 misses. You lost the game 31-23. Those 12 points wins you that game. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. But, geez, come on, Mason. You used to be one of the best kickers in the league. Yeah, so thumbs down to kicking in general. A big thumbs down to the UFC as a whole. The fight was great. So I'm going to thumbs up the 2 competitors in the fight. But Dana White allowing the antics to go on like it's WWE wrestling. People going at each other's families, wives, children, fathers, mothers. and then allowing one of your superstars and the title holder in your, fighting association to get jumped by this guy's boys is just absolutely ridiculous. Dana White, you got to do something about that. Protect your stars, protect your assets. Conor McGregor is your money-making machine. People may not like him, just like people didn't like Floyd Mayweather, but you still have to protect them because they are what brings revenue to your sport. Protect your best assets. So thumbs down to the UFC, but thumbs up to Khabib. Great fight and a great win. Just true domination. So thumbs up to that. Thumbs up to the Washington Capitals. One of the teams that employs me. We're winning. I don't know how I feel about it, but we're winning. 7-0 on opening night on the banner night. The banner, beautiful for anybody who hasn't seen it. You'll see it if you go to Capital One Arena. Thumbs down to the New York Rangers, my pride and joy. 0-3 to start the season. Currently the worst team in the National Hockey League. Never thought I would see this day because they're normally good, and now they're not. So I'm curious. Thumbs up to Gritty for the whole San Jose Sharks thing at the Camden Aquarium, just beating up plush sharks in a Camden Aquarium gift shop. Thumbs up to Gritty throwing things at the Sharks just because they were playing San Jose. So thumbs up to Gritty for that. Then thumbs down to the Flyers for getting put down 8-2 by Erik Karlsson and the San Jose Sharks. Like, if you're going to have Gritty do that, you got to make it a game at least. But thumbs up to Gritty. It seems to be the most advertised mascot in the National Hockey League, bar none. Thumbs down to Jake Elmsley because he sucks. That will never die as long as I'm on the show. But again, thumbs up to Isaac for joining the crew. We're happy to have you, and it should be a good semester and a good year with you guys. But I'll wrap it up here. So for Isaac, Cam, Luke, Aaron in the back, Dan Orlich in the back, Dan Roth in the back, I'm Ryan Siegel saying good night. Tune into SportsZone next week.